Welcome back to another project. In this project, we are going to create a temperature converter. As you can see from the final version of the project, we have three inputs here that is for the Celsius, Fahrenheit, and Kelvin temperature formats. And if we change any of them, for example, if we choose the Celsius 100 degree, we get the equivalent of the Celsius inside the Fahrenheit and Kelvin. And for example, if we change the input, we see a real-time change inside the other inputs as well. And we can change the other inputs to, for example, 100 Fahrenheit is equal to 37 Celsius and 311 Kelvin. So we're going to learn how to use onchange event listener to track the changes inside the inputs. And also we're going to learn how to use the switches statement to track the changes based on the name of the inputs that we are working on. And also we're going to use CSS to style our project like this neomorphism design. In the next section, we're going to start with the HTML part of the project. So see you in the next section. Welcome back to the project. In this section, we're going to work on the HTML part of the project. As you can see, I have put the final version of the project as our reference to compare our project with the final version when we need it. Now, the first things we need to do is to create the HTML file of the project. So I would like to use Visual Studio Code for creating the code. After opening the Visual Studio Code, we close the Get Started tab, and inside the File menu, we click on the Open folder. We want to create a folder and work on this folder for the project. I would like to create the project in my desktop, so I click on the desktop, and here I create a new folder and I call it temperature converter which is the name of our project. So we just write down temperature converter and we press enter to create the folder. Now we can click on the select folder to select the folder. Here we close the Get Started tab again, and as you can see, now the VS Code is in default is in that folder that we have created, temperature converter. And now we can create our HTML file here. So we click on this icon to create the HTML file, and we call it index.html. Now we have the file on the right side, which is completely empty, but it is fine. We can use an exclamation mark to create an HTML boilerplate. So we just write on an exclamation mark. We get an auto suggestion from Emmet abbreviation. When we click on the first auto suggestion, we get an HTML boilerplate, which gives us the metadata, title, and etc. Let me explain this real quick. Maybe you might be familiar with this, but I'm just explaining and assuming that this is your first project. So the first line is doc type, which tells the browser which version of HTML we are using. And for HTML5, we just use HTML here. Then we have the HTML tag, which is covering all the website, including the head and the body tag. Inside the HTML opening tag, we have a blank attribute which defines the language of the page. And by default, we have English as the language, but you can change it with any language you are creating your website. Then after that, we have the head tag, which covers the metadata tag and also the title tag. The first metadata tag defines the char set attribute, and UTF-8 is recommended because it nearly contains all the characters and symbols. So the users that are watching and using our website won't have any problem seeing the characters or symbols inside the website. So the UTF-8 is recommended by HTML5 for new websites. The next metadata tag is for people who are using Internet Explorer. For them, suggest to use the most recent rendering engine, which is Edge. So their Internet Explorer is going to use Edge engine instead of the Internet Explorer. Then we have the viewport metadata tag, which sets the width of the screen width of the browser to the device's screen that we are using. For example, if we have a mobile screen, the width of the browser would be less when we are using different devices like tablets or computers. The next section inside this metadata tag is the initial scale or initial zoom level of the browser, and by default it's set to be 100%. If you wanted, for example, 80%, you just change it to 0.8, for example. Then we have the title tag, which sets the title of the page, and by default it's document. Let's see it inside the browser. We can open the browser using the live server extension. If you have installed this extension, you can click on the Go Live on the bottom of the Visual Studio Code to open the default browser with the website that we are working on, and the index.html is going to be open by default, and the title is document as we have inside the title tag. Let's bring the website on the right side and the Visual Studio Code on the left side. Let's close the Explorer section to have more space. So the title is document. We can change the title to the name of our project, which is the temperature converter. And the next things we need to do is just create the website. Let me show you inside the final version. The final version, as you can see, it has a container in the middle of the screen. Then we have a title here. Then we have 3 inputs, including the Celsius, Fahrenheit, and Kelvin. Each of them, they have their own inputs. So we're going to add 3 inputs plus a title at the top, and everything would be inside a container. So we need to add a div with a class of container inside the body section. So we just write down dot container, and we accept the auto suggestion from Emmet by clicking on tab or enter. So this is going to give us a div with a class of container, and inside this container we're going to add the, for example, that title. For example, we add a h1 tag with a class of heading, and the title is temperature converter, so I can copy from this here. The reason I have added the class of heading, because we're going to style this heading later using CSS. Any class I add, the purpose of that is to use it later when we are targeting it inside the CSS. After that, we're going to have these 3 section. Each of them are inside a div. So this is a div, for example, and inside the div we have this label Celsius and this input. So we're going to have a div. So the div, I just called the class for that one, for example, box, or you can just say, for example, temperature container. You have to be very specified, so later you check your code, you can remember what you have done. So inside this div, we're going to add a label, and this label is going to be for the Celsius. So we just write down Celsius here, and the label is going to say Celsius as well. And we can add some clone here. So if you can see, now we have it inside the final version, the label. After the label, we're going to have an input, but with the type of number. So we can add a colon and just say number, and we click and press enter to accept the auto suggestion. The type is number, the name is Celsius. And also we're going to have an ID of Celsius, because later we're going to use this ID to track the changes inside input using JavaScript. So we need to add an ID here. ID is just unique. You cannot use the Celsius in other section of the HTML anymore. Then we have a placeholder. So when there is nothing inside this input, we see this text for reference. So we just say enter temperature. You can see here. The other things we want to do is we want to install this input later. So we're going to add a class and we call it input. So for styling, we use class. For JavaScript, we use ID. This is the way I use, but you can also use class for JavaScript as well. But because ID is unique, it's easier to track a specific input using ID. but class can be used in many other places. So that is fine for this section. For this Celsius, we can copy this section 2 more times to create the other temperature as well. So we just use Alt Shift arrow down 2 times to copy this. And we're going to just change the Celsius by using Ctrl D. We can choose all the Celsius and we change the second one to Fahrenheit. So we just write down Fahrenheit. Okay, this one should be capitalized, so I change this one. So the next one, we change the Celsius to using Ctrl D to Kelvin. We just say Kelvin. And this one should be capitalized. All right. So that's set for the HTML part of the project. As you can see, the looking is different inside the final version. So in the next section, we're going to use CSS to style this project and make it similar to the one in the final version. So see you in the next section for the CSS part of the project. All right, in the last section, we have completed the HTML part of the project. In this section, we're going to start styling the project using CSS. If you look at the final version, you can see that we have a container here in the middle, and the background color of the body is just a linear gradient from light green to light blue, and the container is transparent as well, so it's kind of glassy or neumorphism design. These inputs as well. So we're going to firstly create the CSS file. So we need to open the Explorer section here using Ctrl-Shift-E. And here we click on this icon to create a new file, and we call it style.css. Before using the CSS file, we need to add a link to the CSS file within the HTML file. So we go to index.html, and just after the title tag, we just add a link tag, and we just write down link, and we click on the third auto suggestion, the one with the CSS. Now we have a link tag with the relationship between the index.html and the style.css. The href attribute here shows the destination of the link, and as both files are located at the same directory, we just need to have a style.css here. Let's close the Explorer section to have more space here, and we go to the style.css and we start with the body section. We just target the body and we open a set of curly braces. The first things I want to do is remove the default margin of the page so that we can easily bring everything to the center. So everything is connected to the wall now. Let's change the background color, and we set it to be linear gradient, and I want it to be just like here, top and bottom. So we want it to left, bottom. So this is going to divide the browser inside the diameter here, from here, and the color I want it to be light green and light blue. It starts from light green to light blue. So we can see it now, because this height of the screen is not defined, we see it like this. We can set the min height of the screen to be 100% of the viewport height, which is going to cover all the browser, and it doesn't matter what is the size of the browser. We always see it like this. And in order to bring this one to the center, we need to change the display of the body to flex, and then we can use justify content center to bring everything to the center horizontally, and align item center to bring everything to the center vertically. But before using the align item center, you need to set the min height to 100% of the viewport height. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And also, I want the font family, the font of the browser to be, font of all the texts and elements to be, for example, mono space. And let's increase the font size. Oh, let's don't change it. We can change this font size in each element. Just change the color of the texts from the black to dark cyan, which is kind of green color, greenish color. So that was it for the body section. Now we want to target the container, this container. And inside the index.js, we put everything inside this container with the class of, with this div with the class of container. So we can target that one using dot container. First things first, I want to add the background color for that one so we can see it. So we change the background. We use RGBA, which is the red, green, blue, alpha. For the red, green, and blue, we use 255 to give, which gives us the white color. And then we can use the last value, which is alpha. We set it to be 0.3, which means 30% transparency. So it gives us this color. Then we're going to have a padding of 20 pixels to have some space between the borders and everything else inside it. And also let's have some box shadow. So we want a 0 for the x-axis, 4 pixels for the y-axis, and 10 pixels for the blurriness. And the color I want to use is RGBA, 000 for black color, and 0.3 for the transparency. So we get this color. And the other things I want to do, I want to change the border here. The border, I want it to be rounded. So I want to change the border radius, and I want it to be 10 pixels. So we should see the change now. Let's make it smaller again, and we set the width of the container to be 85%, like this. And this is going to be applied in all sizes, but I want the max width to be 450 pixels, which is going to limit it like this. And let's set the min width as well. So when in the mobile size and very small screen size, we won't have any problem by just changing it to 350. Sorry, this one should be min width, not height. Okay. So this is responsive as well. In the small screen, we have a good size. So, and everything, we can set the display to flex, and we can bring them on top of each other by changing the flex direction to column. So in this case, we can bring them to the center using align items center like this. So that was it for the container section. Let's style this box we have here. We have a div with a class of temp container. So we want to target that one. So we just say dot temp container, which is covering the label and the input. And we set this one, we set its width to be 100%. So this is going to take all these places. Let's add some padding of 15 pixels. And we set the font weight to be bold, like this. So I forgot to style this heading as well. So this temperature converter, let's target that one by just targeting dot heading, which is this h1 tag with the class of heading. So the heading, I just want it to be, we just changed the font size and make it bigger. So 32 pixels for this. So we make it bigger, and I think it's enough for this heading. Now let's install this inputs. So the inputs, all the inputs, they have the class of input. So we can target them with just saying dot input. So the first things I want to do is increase the width. So we set the width to be 220 pixels, like this. Then we just change, because the font family, we change it to be monospace. We add some padding and we set it to be 5 pixels, and we float it to the right side. As you can see, it's just connected to the label. We can float it to the right side. So it's going to be like that. And let's remove the outline. So when we click on it, we don't see that line around it. And finally, we change the background color to be RGBA, white with 30% transparency. And let's check the border color to be an RGBA white, but this time with the 50% transparency. So we get this design. And let's change the color to be dark green. So the text inside, so for example, we type something, we get dark green. And we set the font size to be, for example, 20 pixels. So this is a bit big. So let's make this one 18. This one should be fine. Just these texts are small, so we can target that one by just changing the font size inside the temp container. And we make it, for example, 18 pixels here. So if we change this font size, we don't need to have this font size. So we can remove that actually. Oh, no, for the input, we need to add it as well. So that's fine. So for both of them, we use font size 18 pixels. All right. So everything looks okay, except this placeholder. We can just target the placeholder by just saying .input to double clone. And we just say placeholder. And we just want to change the color to dark gray, like this. So everything works fine. Let's refresh the page. This is the final version. The final version, the text is a bit bigger, but looks fine too. This one looks fine too. So that was it for the CSS part of the project. In the next section, we're going to add functionality, including the getting these inputs and calculating the other temperatures, and automatically call a function and change the other ones. So we're going to use a method, an event listener, and we just want to add an event listener for the onchange, and we're going to call a function and do this mathematics to calculate the other temperature simultaneously when we are changing these things. So in the next section, we're going to work on the JavaScript part of the project. So see you in the next section. All right, welcome back. In the last section, we have completed the CSS part of the project. In this section, we're going to add more functionality to the website using JavaScript. If you look at the final version, you can see when we come to the website, all the inputs are empty. But if you add something, for example, here in Fahrenheit, I just say 100 Fahrenheit. This is going to give us the Celsius and Kelvin after pressing the enter. Or if we change it like this, from the input, we see the real-time change inside the other format of temperature. So we need to add a function that is going to calculate the other ones. And also we need to add onchange event listener to each input. So when there is a change inside this input, a function would be triggered and calculate the other one and update the other inputs. So the first things we need to do is to create a JavaScript file. So we go back to Visual Studio Code and we open the Explorer section. And here on the left side in the Explorer section, we click on this icon to create a new file. And we call it index.js. And similar to the CSS, before using the JavaScript file, we need to add a link to the HTML file in order to use that JavaScript file. And the link is going to be at the end of the body section because we want all the elements to be loaded first. For example, all the inputs to be loaded first, and then the functionality is added using this JavaScript. Otherwise, the elements would be empty and we cannot have access to them. So we need to add a script tag here. So we just write down SC, and we can click on the second auto suggestion, the one with the src. The src is the destination of the file, and both files are located at the same directory. I mean the index.html and index.js. So the destination would be just index.js. So now we can use the JavaScript file in our project. As first thing first, I want to create a function here. I want to create a function and I'm going to call it, for example, compute or calculate temperature, or temp for short. So this function is going to be called using these inputs. And let's try to do it. So in our website, we when we have a change inside these inputs, we want to call that function. So inside index.html, we can add onchange event listener to the input. So we can just use dual cursor using Alt and click on these sections, and we can add an onchange event listener, the first one, and this is going to trigger that function that we have created. So we're going to call the function here. We just call it compute temp, and we need to call it, so we need to add a parenthesis here at the end. Okay, so after saving, you can see that's prettier formatted our inputs. So now, for example, if we console log, for example, we console log change, and if we go to our website and open the console using F12, so make sure this is console, and here you can see the changes. So if we change this one, you see that we console log change, the one that we have added inside the function. Any of them we change, we see the changes. But the things is important for us. We want to get the value of these inputs, and also we want to know which input is changing. We can do that by adding an event here. So we need to just add an event here inside the function that we are calling. So we need to add an event at each of them. And inside the JavaScript, inside the function, we can get the event here. For example, if I console log event dot, for example, target dot name, so this one should be dot name. Now, when we change here, you see the name of this input. So inside the index.html, we see the name is here. For example, it's Kelvin. The first one, the name is Celsius, and the second one is Fahrenheit. So whatever we have changed, we see the name is printed inside here. For example, we can get the value too. Instead of name, we can just get for example, we can get the value. So now, for example, this one is 1, 2, 3, 5. If I do this one is 1. So we're getting the value of this one that is changing. So in this way, we can have the information inside the inputs, and we know which input is triggered, and we can calculate the other temperature formats based on that input. And also we can change and update the other inputs. So we need to bring all the inputs first because we want to change them. So if you look at the HTML, each of them, they have an ID. For example, the second one has the ID of Fahrenheit. The first one is the ID is Celsius. So we can bring that element using the method called getElementById. So we need to create a constant. For example, for Celsius, I call it Celsius element. And this is going to be equal to document because we want to target all the browser and all the documents inside the browser. And we can use the getElementById to target that ID, which was for the first one, Celsius. All right. Now we have for the first one, let's copy this one using Alt-Shift-Arrow down. And we change the Celsius for the second one using Ctrl-D to select both of them. And we change the second one to Fahrenheit. So we just write Fahrenheit. Make sure that you don't make a spelling mistake because otherwise you don't get the result. So we got the Fahrenheit. For the third one, we use Ctrl-D and we change this one to Kelvin. Now we have the elements. Now we can change the elements based on the input. So we have the value here. So we create a constant and we just say current value or the input that is triggered. So we just call it current value, the one that is calling the function value. So we missed the A here. So this one is equal to that event that we are getting dot target dot value. But there is just some bug in the JavaScript. Sometimes the input is actually, this input is number, but sometimes it passes the string instead of number. So we need to always convert this value to number. We can do that simply by adding a plus sign before the value. So in this case, we always get the number. not the value, because we want to do some computation, some mathematics. So we need to really have the number, not the string, because if we have a string, we cannot do the mathematics or math operation on this value. So now we can use the switch here to, based on the name of the event, we change the other ones. So the switch works like this. The switch statement, if you click on that, it has a key. The key is this event.target.name. So for example, if the name that we are getting is Celsius, so in case that this one is Celsius, so we just write down here inside the quote, Celsius. If this is Celsius, we want to change the Fahrenheit and Kelvin. So for example, the Kelvin, this one, we want to change its value. So we just target its value. And this one is going to be equal to the current value, which is the value of the Celsius, plus 273.32. So this is a formulation to convert Celsius to Kelvin. If we add 273.32 to Celsius, we get Kelvin. And also for Fahrenheit, we change the value. So this is going to be the current value, but this is for changing it to Fahrenheit, we need to multiply this one to 1.8 and add 32 to it. So this is the way we do that one for the Celsius. So we need to add more cases, because in case that we have Fahrenheit for the input and the event.target.name is Fahrenheit, so we need to have the Fahrenheit. So let me copy this Fahrenheit and put it here. In case that is Fahrenheit, we want to change the Celsius element, its value, and we can calculate that one based on the Fahrenheit value, which we are getting from the current value from here. So the current value, Celsius is the opposite. We just put it in the parentheses. We minus this one first from the 32, and instead of multiplying to 1.8, we need to divide it from 1.8. So it's just the opposite. And we have to add a clone here too, so we don't get an error. And for Kelvin, this is going to be calculated like this. We need to just the current value, we minus that one to 32. We divide it. So let's put it inside another parenthesis. So we divide it to 32 and over 1.8. Now we need to add 273.15 to that. And it should be 32 because this is similar to this one, 273.32. So that is fine. So after the break, we want to add the final case, which is Kelvin. So if the Kelvin happens, we want to change the Celsius dot value, and this is going to be equal to just the current value, but instead of plus 273.32, we need to minus that. So we need to decrease 272. It's just the opposite. And let's do the other one, the Fahrenheit. So this is the last one. So we need to add two parentheses, and then this is going to be value minus 273.32. I'm not sure this is 32 or 15. You can check it online, but it doesn't matter. We just you can change it for yourself. So the most important things is these things that we are learning from JavaScript. The other ones is just an example. So we need to multiply this one to 1.8, and we add 32 at the end. All right. So we have just created all the models, and after this, just remember to break as well. Okay. So it's automatically removed our parentheses. So the reason I put the parentheses because let me show you here. So when we are changing now each of them, we see the changes the other one. Sometimes we get the very long decimal numbers. The number of decimals are too much, so we can remove that one by just adding dot fix .toFixed at the end. And we just fix it to 2 digits. So we can copy this one and add it to here, to all of them. So now, if we try, we never get more than 2 digits here. So what's this? The Kelvin, Fahrenheit doesn't work when I change the Kelvin. So let's check that one. So when we changing the Kelvin, so this value, oh, this one shouldn't be value. This one should be current value. Sorry about that. So now the Kelvin works as well. So 273.15 is actually 0 Celsius. Sorry, it shouldn't be 15, 32. We have used 32. Okay. So just let me review what we have done. So inside the index.html, we have added an onchange event listener to each of the inputs. We have added the events so we can get the value, the name, type, or whatever inside this input is. And inside the index.js, we have created the function. We got the event. We got the value of the input that is triggering the function, and we call it current value. And we have used the switch statement. So based on the name of the event that we are getting, for example, if the input is Celsius, in case it's Celsius, we change the Kelvin and Fahrenheit. If it's Fahrenheit, we change the Celsius and Kelvin. And if it's Kelvin, we change the Celsius and Fahrenheit. And also we have just used this formulation to change their values. And finally, we have added toFixed to limit the number of decimals to only 2 digits. So that was it for our project. I hope you enjoyed and learned many things. We have practiced the switch statement. We have also learned how to use onchange event listener to call a function from the HTML. And also we have learned how to bring the elements using getElement by ID. So I hope you enjoyed. So see you in the next project.